name is Frank Bunker. Most of you I've probably met, if not. Welcome to the Insight class. We have moved to Thursdays to try and make it a little easier for people to attend. In addition, today our focus is going to be on learning to use Stratum, so 5 things to help you get started. So I'm going to just show a quick couple of PowerPoint slides and then get right into using Stratum and showing you things. Be aware that today's session is being recorded, so if you want to use this as a session to show, or a video to show people, this will be out on the in the Resource Center out on sylvan.com, so you'll be able to get that or through the homepage. And then the other thing that you can do is, or that we're going to talk about a little bit, is just some of the resources that are available to you, and I think that's something that everyone today should already have access to. So two sections of what we're going to talk about today. One is the 5 things to get you started, but I'm going to start with a little bit, maybe it's a bonus item, number 6, to learn about some of the resources that are available. So I'll just spend a quick moment on that, and then we'll get going. So there's a bunch of resources you can use that are available to you when you're in Stratum. So the thing that I'm going to make the assumption here is that if you're a new user to Stratum, or someone that's trying to get started and use Stratum a little better, you already know how to get into Stratum. If you don't, you'll need to ask your admin on how to get in. But with that, there's some really great resources available to you out there. First of all, Sylvan as a whole, we're here to help. I put up our product support email there. You can send a message to info@sylvan.com. You can send a message to me, frank.bunker@sylvan.com. Anyone here would be happy to help you get started or get past something you're doing in Stratum, so don't hesitate to give us a call. Then the other couple of things that are really a part of Stratum and some of the resources that we develop and continue to develop and enhance, not necessarily in lockstep with the releases of the product. We continue to enhance some of these resources ahead of the product or in addition to the product, but is really the first thing is the Stratum homepage. So when you bring up Stratum, and we'll see this in a minute, there's a screenshot there to the right. This is really Resource Central for all of the different things you have to learn how to use Stratum. There's a ton of stuff in here, and I'll go through some of that when we get there. If you don't see that page that's off to the right there, we'll see it again in just a sec, don't hesitate to talk to your admin and ask them why it is. There is an option in Stratum for you guys to have a custom homepage, and that might be something you guys decided to do to show other information. It's not necessarily a bad thing. It just doesn't have some of the, you may not have some of the links to stuff there. But you can get to most of these links, if not all of them, from sylvan.com as well, and under the Resource Center banner there, so you can do that. In addition, we have what I think is really great help in Stratum, and you can hover over the gear. I'll show that again in just a sec. In the upper right-hand corner, there's help, there's videos, there's a help topic called, amazingly enough, first-time users. That should certainly help you be able to use Stratum if you're a first-time or early users. And then for everybody, we have what we call our icon cheat sheet, which I would highly recommend you take a look at and even consider printing out and having available if that's something that, as you get started, just trying to learn what all the different options you have are in Stratum and what the different icons mean. So without further ado, I will let you know that I just kind of ran through the 5 things I'm going to list off here, and I just put some quick notes together. If anyone wants a copy of this PowerPoint, certainly don't hesitate to email info@sylvan.com or frank.bunker@sylvan.com, and I can send this off to you so you can have a copy of it. Those were just kind of working notes for you to be able to use. So let's go ahead and let's go into Stratum. So as you can see, I've gone into my copy of Stratum here, and you'll see I have the Stratum homepage that I was mentioning came up. So sticking with the resource topic for just a minute, I wanted to show a couple of things. One, some of the really great resources that we have are these videos right here. So I just clicked on this Watch Our Videos, and here's a list of all the different videos that we have available. You'll see this homepage morph and change over time, but don't be concerned about that. The general set of things that are available here will be available to you regardless of what we do. The other thing is these classes we're having today. Some of you may have joined this way off of this menu right here. You can also join via emails that we send out. So you may have joined via email through an email you received. But this is the list of classes. You can see what's coming up. You can see the entire catalog. Most importantly, you can see archived courses. So as you get into more and more in-depth topics that you might be interested in Stratum, they might be in our videos here. These videos are usually 4 minutes or less, or you can see longer, more in-depth information about different things that we do off these archived classes, so you can do that. There's also a forum if you've got questions. This is something that you can use as a reference tool and a Q&A platform. Don't hesitate to post questions, and you'll get answers back on that. And then you can actually join the crowd as well, which is just a way for us to get your name and an email address that you're okay with us sending you some information. We won't barrage you with stuff, but you will get some information about Stratum and different things that have been happening. So that's the resources. So now let's get to the heart of the matter, using Stratum and learning to use Stratum as an early user. And what are some of the things that you can do to get started? So the premise of this presentation was 5 things, so I'm going to try and stick to 5 things. I've broken those up into number 1 is how do you run a view, and what are these view group thingies over here. So first of all, Stratum is organized into views within view groups, and if I open one of these view groups, you'll see there's a bunch of what we call views. It's really straightforward to run a view. You can open one of these, and then you can click on something to run a view. So I'll just go ahead and I'm going to click on this. That was 1 click on the header up there, sales. I clicked on SPM sales and profitability, and then I can run one of these views, and I'll run a very simple view, comparative sales. So there you go. You can see I ran a view, and now that came up. So in its simplest form, that's all you need to do. Another way that you can run views is using this favorite and recents window. If you're an early user to Stratum, or even a first-time user to Stratum, one of the things is you won't have anything in this window. So a bit of a catch-22. Until you get started, you'll want to make sure that you know how to run views out of these view groups as you're looking for additional views to run, etc. So again, you just come in here, you can click on one of these, you can run them, and that's in its simplest form. You can run a view and use that. And you can say, hey, I love this view, I want to use it all the time, and you can click on the little star right up here, and that will in fact now start populating your favorite and recents. So if I was to click on this and see this window, that view that I just ran, which was called sales metrics units, you can see it's now been added. I can actually move these around. If I don't want that to be at the top of my list, I can drag them around. You'll also see in my recently used views, that same view shows up here. So this is the last 30 things that you ran, I believe. So this will just put them in there. They're out there. I've actually run all my stuff this week, but if it was run in prior weeks, you'd actually have a heading for this week, last week, etc., things like that. So I find my world, when I use Stratum, I tend to use the favorite and recents window, which is my point number 2. I think it's really important that you use this window as it gets you a nice, concise set of views broken into 2 different groups of things. One is the views you use all the time. Maybe you don't use them every day, but you know you go back to them repeatedly. There are things that you want to be able to reference. Maybe you only go into some of them at the end of the month, end of the quarter, end of the year, things like that. But you can have them here. And then things that I'm working on currently, they continue to show up over in this recently used list. There certainly is overlap between them as I create some favorites that I use all the time. But that said, other things, if I had a view that I was really focused on a certain set of customers, and I'd filtered down to just see those customers, it'll start popping up over here. I won't have to search for it through all of this. So using favorites and recents, I think, is a really important way to make it easier for you to find the views that you want to run and keep track of the views that you like to run on a regular basis, those that are favorites. And all, as I said, all you got to do is you can click the star to add or remove it from your favorites. So very easy to take that out of my favorites, and that'll come off. Now if we go, sorry about that, if I come over here, what you'll see is that that's no longer listed here I also, just FYI, if you want to remove this, you can actually remove it from your favorite views right here as well. So lots of ways you can interact with things in Stratum and do the same task different ways, but this is a really key part. So number one there was running a view. So very simple, just go in and run a view. Number two was using recents and favorites. I highly recommend that you do that stuff. By the way, if you have something that's a recent and you want to make it a favorite, you can just go over here. Right here, there's an add to favorite. You can actually change the name if you'd rather give it a name, but I can save it over here. And now that shows up here. So let's see. That was the really, really basic stuff. So I ran a couple views there. I was able to show you how to do things. So now let's talk about my point number 3 in the 5 things that we're going to talk about in learning to use Stratum. And number 3 is dimensions. So dimensions in Stratum are products, customers, product categories, states, things like that. The other component that everyone cares about, of course, is amounts and units and costs, and those are called measures. So all those things that you measure or numeric in nature, and you want to roll the values up or split them down, those are typically measures. Dimensions are the things, products, customer states, divisions, business units, things like that that you want to know about. So let's look at what we can do with dimensions in Stratum. And again, I'm going to open a very simple view in Stratum so that we can work with dimensions. And some of the first things that we can do with dimensions is we can drill. So here, note that these dimensions, I have division and product brand are listed here, and I'm looking in what we call the grid. So this part of this screen is the grid. And I can pick any one of these, and I can just go here and I'll click down. If I click on it, it says see product data. So how does it know to go to product? So Stratum knows that by this list of things right up here. You can see that the division is in blue, the brand is in blue, which indicates they're showing in the grid. The next thing in the list is product. So if I went down to Farm Fresh and I drilled on this, it went to all the products underneath there. I can go all the way back to divisions by clicking on this. I could get the same view I was just looking at the brand level like that. So dimensions, you can drill on them. You click on them, and I can actually click up in this list too. You'll see it's underlined and it's blue. If I click here, it's going to drill down to the brand. Now, 2 different kind of drills there that you should be aware of. So I'll go back to on the individual pieces. So the F for food service or G for grocery, it's going to drill down just on that one. If I drill on the header where it says division, it's going to drill on both of them. So it basically created a subtotal for me. So I see the total for F, I see the total for G, and then I see a grand total for all of it. So those are 2 different ways you can drill in Stratum. This is where you can be very focused and laser focused on individual items, or you can go ahead and drill and get a more general picture that you might want to scroll through, etc. So that was some simple things on drilling on dimensions. Dimensions are something that can move between these 3 groups, rows, columns, and filters. So you can easily move dimensions around just by dragging and dropping them. So here, if I wanted the dimensions to be in the columns, I could just drop it right in the word columns, and now it'll be in the columns. I could have also taken, and I can drag that back up to rows, and I can put it there, so I can move those around pretty easily. I could have also taken divisions out of the grid and dragged it up here. So I just dropped it on the columns. I think what's important there is just to remember that you can move dimensions between rows, columns, and filters. So what would happen if I drag the dimension to the filter, the division to the filter? So I drag it there, and it tells me I'm looking at all divisions. So in essence, I've not really filtered anything, but now it's prepared to be filtered. So we're going to come around, and I'm going to spend a little more time on filters, but once something's in the filter row, in this filter row here, I can just click on it, and I could pick a particular. So I picked there, and now you'll see there's a little filter next to it. It tells me I'm filtered on division F. You can see this filter button up here, which I'll talk about later, because that's another one of my points. Within here is how we can filter on that. So let's just talk a little bit more, though, about dimensions and manipulating dimensions. So the first thing I did there was I dragged divisions to the columns, then I dragged it down to filters. You can also see, as I mentioned, the drill down path, which now if I drill on brand, I'm going to go to product, then to salesperson, then to customer. But let's say I wanted to go from brand to region. So how do I jump from brand all the way to region? Pretty easy. I can take the region and I can drag it and put it right there, right after region. I could drop it. I can drop the region right on the product brand, or I can just drop it on one of these individual things. I'll drop it up here. I find it very easy to work up here. I'll just drag it there, and now when I drill on product brand, I'm going to see the brand for each of my regions. So I can change the order of these things very easily just by dragging and dropping them around and shifting the order. So probably the next question that comes up is, well, I don't see the thing that I want to have. So let's say what I was really interested in here was my, I don't know, my distribution channel. So what I want to do is see how I can move from product brand and see what distribution channels are happening. So to do that, it's very easy. I just click the plus sign right there. I scroll down to my D's and find the distribution channel. Here we go, distribution channel. I'm just going to say OK. Stratum makes the assumption if you selected something, it's the next thing you want to do. So it inserted distribution channel right after the product brand. Now when I drill on brand, it's going to go down and show me the sales by distribution channel. So very simple to add a dimension, very simple to move them around. I can do all those things again if I wanted to see the maybe a more of a matrix view. Now I just put my distribution channels across the top. So very easy to add. If I wanted to add something to the columns, to the filters, I can just click these plus signs. So I can also remove dimensions from here. Let's say I don't really want the salesperson to be a part of this. I just go ahead and click the X right there, and now salesperson is no longer listed. I can always go back and get it by clicking a plus sign, the plus sign, and going down to my S's, and it'll be in there. So that's an easy way to manipulate dimensions. Second thing, last thing I wanted to talk about on dimensions was the ability to filter them. So right now I showed you how to filter on this. In a more generic sense, anytime you want to filter, just click on this big filter button here, this funnel, and here's all the dimensions that we have, and I can filter on any of these things. So let's say I really was only interested in the eastern region. So I could come in here, I can click on here, select the eastern region, say OK. It's only going to show me stuff for the east. We can see that region is up here. I don't know if you can see that, and it's grayed out. But it's automatically going to move that into the filter because I've said I want to filter on it here. So I'll just say OK. And now you'll see I'm filtered on the eastern region. So the data reflects only that data that's in the eastern region. So that's dimensions. The next thing that I wanted to talk about was time. And this is something that people like in Stratum. There's a lot of cool stuff you can do with time. But actually we treat time two different ways. One is with time ranges, and one is with time, trended time, or time as a dimension. I'm going to show two examples of that. So let's start with, I'm going to simplify my view, just moving that up there. So we have a very simple view again, and this particular view uses time ranges. And what does that mean? That means each column has its own set of time associated with it, and that time could be weeks, months, whatever. Typically, people tend to use the same time in every column, but that's not required. In this particular view, I'm comparing this year to last year to get this percentage. So I certainly want these two columns to have the same conceptual time for the current year and previous year. So to adjust time in a column, and this is in a time range view, so I'm using time ranges, which is the default in Stratum. Anytime you bring up a view, unless someone specifically changed it, it uses time ranges. You can just click on this column header, and you'll see that you can go ahead and change the time. So I could say this says current year, current month, and back 2 months here. I could change both of these by highlighting both. So now it takes away the year because these had different years in them. So we don't have a generic change on the year, but what's important here is I have a generic change on the months. So I could go ahead and say, instead of 2 months ago, I want to see this for the trailing for a rolling 6 months. So that would be 5 months ago plus current. That would give me a total of 6, and I can just say OK. And now you'll see these two columns, as well as this calculation that's based off of them, changed to be able to do that. So that's time ranges. Time range columns are usually indicated by some kind of indication in the header of from something to something, and you can see again down here you simply change the from time and the to time. Depending on your implementation, you might have different kinds of time units here. In my particular case, I have days, I have fiscal months, I have months, quarters, and weeks. So you can select any of those. When you select that time unit, you then will have years, and you can select what we call based or relative time, which is current year, last year, things like that. If I drop that down, you'll see I have those things, or you can select actual individual years. And then same thing with the period, and the period represents the time unit. The period might be months, in this case it's months. If I'd selected days or weeks here, this period would be representative of those, of weeks or days. And when I do a drop down here, since I'm looking at months, it says I can pick any given month. I can pick 6 months ago, etc. If I wanted to go back further than 6 months, because that's all the relative time I have defined, I could actually use this offset. I could say what I really want to do is go back, I don't know, 10 months or something like that. I can just enter minus 10 there, and it will go back minus 10 from whatever I have listed right here. So if I wanted minus 10 from the current month, just set that to current month. Now that would be 10 months ago from the current month. So you can do that in Stratum. Very easy to manipulate time and do that kind of stuff. So that is a time range view, and that's probably the most common stuff that you'll see. But then there's also trended time, and I wanted to show an example of that. So if I come in and show a view of trended time, I'm going to bring up another very simple view that's just showing me the current year. And in fact, I'm going to go ahead and hide some of this stuff. I'm jumping ahead a little bit into my measures, but I want to hide some of this stuff so that it's just a very, very simple view that shows me sales by company and division. These are my dimensions that we talked about. You can see them up here. And then it shows me months across the top. So what I have here actually is I've taken based time, the current year, so you can see it says current year. Actually, I can drill up to that, and you'll see the next thing is based months. So I could drill down, and it's showing me January through October, because in my data, I only have data for the current year through October in my demonstration. So if I was to pick last year here, let's say just last year to keep it simple, you'll see the data goes out to December because I happen to have data out through December. So I didn't have to define each of those columns. I was able to just select a dimension that represents time, and I put it in the columns. So this is an interesting thing. If I only wanted to see January through, I don't know, March, I could easily come in here and I could filter, just like I could before. I clicked on filter, and I'm going to go to the months, and I'm going to say I just want to see January, February, March, and I can do that and just say select yes, say OK, and now it's just selecting that particular stuff. So a lot of different ways you can filter here. I'll come in here and I'll just clear it all, say OK, and now they're all back. So this is a trended time view, or time as a dimension. And there's some other interesting things you can do here. So when I'm at the year level, so say I have years in the columns, it's kind of interesting that I could come down and I could say, well, then I want to have months for each division. So I could drag my months on there, and I see my months down the side. In addition, I could, drive that down. Then for each month, I could say, well, I'm kind of interested in what I did in June for product categories. So I can say June product categories. Then maybe I'm interested within June, what did I do for beef on every day of June? I just drag days down there. Note there's a filter on days. This was a bad demo on my part, but I'll just clear it, say OK, and now I'm going to get all the days of June and what I did on each day in June as I look at my data. So my point there is you can put time dimensions on both the X and Y axes here are in rows and columns. So there's a lot of interesting things you can do with time as a dimension. What is harder to do is to see things like year to date or rolling 5 months or something like that, where you want to see the sum of something across time, and that's when you use time ranges, which is the most popular view of time that we see. So that was just a little bit on time. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about was measures. So measures, those being, I'm going to bring back up my super simple view of comparative sales and say measures. So this is units, dollars, cost, things like that. And here you can see I've got a bunch of different things. One of the things I can do when I'm thinking about measures, if I want to add one, let's say I want to add year-to-date returns. I'm going to say regular measure. I just clicked on add a measure, and I'm just going to say return. I searched, I found there's my return amount. I'll use that. I'm going to use months here. Then I'm going to go ahead and say I want this for the current year. And then I'm actually going to start in January because I use a regular calendar year. And I'm going to go through the current month so that this shows me year to date, and it automatically rolls forward as we move through time, so I don't have to come in here and constantly change that. I say OK, and you'll see it added the returns down here at the end. I could put those returns, I can drag them around anywhere I want in here. I'll just put them up there, say OK, and now you'll see here's that return amount. And in fact, I can drag these columns around as well if I want to move the data around. So now I just moved it to the end. So with measures, I can click this particular button and I can actually maintain an existing measure. Here I can edit that. So if you remember this window, it came up and I can change the time frame for that particular measure. I can actually delete the measure by clicking X. I can show or hide the measure by clicking the blue button here. If you hide the measure and you want to bring it back, you do need to click the button down here on the left to display your hidden measures. By default, they're not displayed, but we can click that if I decide to hide that. And then I can also use this measure as an example and say, hey, I want to copy it, and then go ahead and change some feature about it. Maybe in this particular case, if I was to copy that measure, but I wanted to change the time, I could easily come in here, just change the time, and it'll add another copy of that measure for me. So a lot of different things you can do just coming right into the measure window, which is listed right here. Two bonus features that I wanted to talk about, which was one, let's say I've made changes to this view and I want to save it. So this would be my number 6 or 7, depending on how you count what I talked about the resources. I just click Save As, and when I do a Save As, there's a couple of things here. I have to give it a name. Names cannot be repeated in Stratum, so this is going to be my Insight example. So I've added a name. You can give it a description if you want to be more comparative. And then remember, it'll show up in a view group. So it's going to save it into the view group where you got your original view from by default, but you can select any view group you'd like, and that's something to note. Now, I'm going to go ahead and save this, but I think the other important thing is if this is a view that you've created and you want to use it a lot, it's going to automatically show up in your recents and favorites, right? Because I was just in there. So it automatically showed up in my recents. But if I want to continue to use it, just click the favorites button. And now it'll be in your favorites list, and it'll show up all the time right there, and you'll see it right there. So that's one thing there. Now the second bonus item I was going to show you here, so this is number 7, is actually when you're filtering, and if say I wanted to see, let's say here, I want to see my top 3 brands for my division. So I'm going to come in, I've drilled down, I'm looking at all my divisions, but what I really want to see is just my top 3. I can come in here on the filters and I can filter my data. And I could say, I'm going to filter that. I want to see my top 3 brands based on this year's year-to-date sales. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to say I want to see top count. I'm probably going to use, you have a lot of options here. I won't go through all of these right now, but I'll use top count. I'm just going to say my top 3, and of course that could be top 5, top 10, whatever. For these, I just have a few. So that's going to show me my top 3 in each of them. So very easy to filter on measures as well. So that was what I was trying to get done today in 30 minutes or less, which turned out to be 35 minutes, but I certainly 32 minutes, I guess, technically. But I certainly appreciate everybody hanging out. I'm going to take the phones off mute if anyone has a question.
Unmuted.
And if anyone has a question, either send me a chat or feel free to just ask away. Any questions? Okay. I'm taking silence as a no. So everyone, have a great weekend. Just one more day to go after today. And we'll see you next time around on the Insight classes. Certainly, as I mentioned, feel free to send me an email or to info@sylvan.com to get a copy of my brief notes on some of the things I covered here. And then again, don't forget to use that resource page that I showed here, or click the help button right here where you can see help, and you can actually come in and see a bunch of different things here. First-time users, for example, you can click on that. This is a great video series over here to the left, or the viewer icon cheat sheet, which actually shows you all of the icons in viewer and what they mean and what they do. So anyways, thanks much, and I will hopefully speak to you guys again soon.